Today we'll be discussing on the topic social costs of monopoly and social costs of monopsony. Economic theory suggests that monopoly results in a social loss because output is restricted below its optimum level, meaning that the marginal benefits and marginal cost are not equated. Traditionally, the social loss is measured in terms of deadweight loss of monopoly. However, this measure of social loss assumes that the monopoly is costlessly created and maintained. In fact, the opportunity to earn monopoly rents results in resources being invested in unproductive activities in their pursuit. When a product is produced and sold under conditions of monopoly, the monopolist gains at the expense of consumers, for they have to pay a price higher than the marginal cost of production. This results in loss of consumers' welfare. To measure welfare gain or loss, some economists have used the concept of consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is the surplus of price which consumers are prepared to pay for a commodity over and above what they actually pay for it. The deadweight loss in consumers' welfare due to monopoly can be shown through the figure where TD is the demand curve for the monopolist product and MR is the corresponding marginal revenue curve. It is assumed that the industry is a constant cost industry so that average cost AC remains the same as output increased and marginal cost is equal to it. Under perfect competition, firms equate price with marginal cost and industry's output is determined by demand and supply for the product. Since we are considering a constant cost industry, a horizontal line AC is equal to MC is the supply curve of the industry. It will be seen from the figure that under perfect competition, price determined is equal to QK and output OQ is being produced. Firms will be equating price OPC with their marginal cost. The consumer surplus enjoyed by the consumers is equal to the area TKPC. It may be noticed that consumer surplus reflects social welfare as it is excess of what consumers are willing to pay over and above what they actually pay. Now, the monopolist would not produce OPC output as he equates marginal revenue with marginal cost to maximize his profits. It will be seen from the figure that marginal revenue and marginal cost are equal at output level OM. Therefore, the monopolist will produce OM output and charge ML or OPM price. Thus, monopolist has restricted output to OM and raised price to OPM. As a result, monopolists make profits equal to the area PMLEPC. On the other hand, as a result of rise in the price to PM, the consumer surplus has been reduced to the area TLPM and they suffer a loss of consumer surplus equal to the area PCKLPM. Thus, there is a redistribution of income from consumers to the monopolist. But it is important to note that loss of consumer surplus PCKLPM, which is greater than the profits made by the monopolist by the area of triangle LKE. The loss in consumer surplus can be divided into two components. First part is the profits equal to the area PMLEPC made by the monopolist at the expense of the consumers. This component of loss in consumer surplus is suffered by those who are still purchasing the product. The second component of the loss of consumer surplus is equal to the area of triangle LKE, which is due to allocative inefficiency caused by the monopolist by reducing output of the product and raising its price. This second component of loss in consumer surplus as measured by the area of triangle LKE is called deadweight loss of welfare caused by the monopolist. This represents social cost of monopoly. It will be seen from the figure that price with the last accessing consumer is willing to pay for the mth unit is ML, while the marginal cost which has to be incurred by the society is ME, and therefore from mth unit, consumers enjoys consumer surplus equal to EL. In the other words, consumer values the product more than the opportunity cost of production as measured by the marginal costs. Likewise, the price which the consumers are willing to pay for additional MQ units exceeds the marginal cost to the society and therefore generates additional consumer surplus. Thus, the social welfare or consumer surplus would be increased if output is extended to the point Q. It will be seen from the figure that the consumers would gain additional consumer surplus equal to the area of triangle LKE if output is increased to OQ. But monopolists would not extend output to point Q because these profits are maximized at OM output. Since for extra units from M to Q, marginal cost exceeds marginal revenue of the monopolist, he will not produce them. But from the social point of view, the extension of output to the point Q is desirable as it increases consumer surplus gained by the consumers. Thus, monopoly caused a net loss of consumer welfare equal to the area of triangle LKE. This is called a deadweight loss of welfare because though consumers suffer a loss of welfare, no one else, not even monopolists, gains from it. This loss of welfare caused by allocative inefficiency of the monopoly. It may be noted that the gain of profits by the monopolists equal to the area PMLEPC has been made possible by the loss of consumer surplus of those who are still purchasing the OM quantity of the product. Even if these profits gained by the monopolists are redistributed among the consumers, the loss of consumer surplus represented by the triangle LKE would still remain and would not be eliminated because, as explained above, they have been caused by allocative inefficiency of monopoly. Hence, it is appropriate to call it a deadweight loss of welfare. With lower production of the product by the monopolists, relatively less resources are allocated to its production. For optimum allocation of resources, OQ amount of the product at which marginal cost equals price should have been produced and resources allocated accordingly. To conclude, monopoly causes misallocation of resources and deadweight loss of welfare. This is also called social cost of monopoly. Thank you. Now over to Lijin P. Matthew.
Good morning all. Today I'm here to talk about the social cost of monopsony. Let's This monopolist's power increases welfare. Well, to measure the welfare impact of monopsony, the monopsony outcomes is compared with perfect competition. In competition, the price is equal to marginal cost, PC is equal to MC. As the competitive price and quantity are PC and QC. The monopsony price and quality are found where marginal value MV equals marginal expenditure. That means MV is equal to ME, PM and QM. The graph indicates that the monopsony reduces output from the competitive level in order to decrease the price PM greater than PC and QM greater than QC. The welfare analysis of a monopoly related to competitive is straightforward. Next, let's look at diagram of monopolistic buyer. The market supply curve is monopolist's average expenditure curve A. Because the average expenditure is rising, marginal expenditure lies above it. The monopolist purchases quantity where marginal expenditure and marginal value demand instance. The price paid per unit is then found from the average expenditure curve. In a competitive market, price and quality PC and QC are both higher. They are found at the point where average expenditure and marginal value instead. Next, look difference between monopoly and monopsony with a graph. This diagram shows that close analogy between monopoly and monopsony. The monopolist produces where marginal revenue interests marginal cost. Average revenue exceeds marginal revenue so that price exceeds marginal cost. B. The monopolist purchases up to point where marginal expenditure in just the marginal value. Marginal expenditure exceeds average expenditure so that marginal value exceeds price.